special program co-organized by GYOPO and Tiger Strikes Asteroid. My name is Alex Paik, and I'm a volunteer on the programs committee at GYOPO, and also founder and director of Tiger Strikes Asteroid, which is a network of artist-run spaces with 5 locations across the country. If you'd like to find out more about GYOPO and or volunteer, you can sign up on the mailing list that's out right by the elevator there. If you want to find out more about Tiger Strikes Asteroid, you can sign up for our mailing list downstairs or go to our website or flag me down or something. So we're very excited and we're a bit overwhelmed by the huge response for this event. And we'd like to thank the Bendix Building for allowing us to use this space for the panel discussion. Once you see TSA, you'll realize why it wouldn't have worked down there. And also to Track 16 Gallery for lending us some chairs, and also to Drawing Cabinet for lending us some stools. And finally, the warmest thank you goes to our GYOPO volunteers and also some of my fellow Tiger Strikes Asteroid folks. This program would not be possible without all of your help. Alternative art spaces play an important role in providing platforms for artists that have been overlooked or erased from the mainstream art world. Today we'll be discussing the common challenges, the driving questions, organizing strategies, and different relationships to mainstream art worlds in both Korea and the United States. Before we get to the discussion though, I want to invite everyone to our post-program reception, which will take place 1 floor down from here on the 5th floor at Tiger Strikes Asteroid, where you can see the exhibition The Most Winning Lottery Store, which was curated by Jungmin Cho, who's one of our panelists. In the interest of time, and because I hate reading long bios, I'm going to just briefly introduce our panelists. If you'd like to learn more, you can read the longer ones, on Instagram or our website. But yeah, it's just super stiff. So to my left is Inyoung Yeo, who's joining us from Korea. She's an artist and she runs SpaceOne. Inyoung currently has work on view at the Torrance Art Museum, which is one of the reasons she came here. Jungmin Cho, who's also here joining us here from Korea, is the director of White Noise, and she's the one that curated the show downstairs, which you'll be able to see after the discussion. And then, oh wow, everybody sat in the order that I wrote this. That's amazing. Jisoo Chung is an artist based in LA and Seoul. She's also a volunteer on the production committee at GYOPO, and recently project managed GYOPO's Freeze film presentation called I Am My Own Other, which was a collaboration with Seoul-based collective Wes. And last but not least, we have Eric Kim, who is one of the co-founders of a local arts nonprofit called Human Resources, and also runs a gallery called Bel Ami, both in Chinatown. He's also one of the co-founders of GYOPO and sits on the board of directors and steering committee. So please join me in welcoming all of our esteemed guests. All right, so just as an icebreaker, I'd like to ask everyone to just please kind of briefly describe your space and or your interest or experience working with alternative art spaces. So whoever wants to go first.
I can start. Hi, I'm Eric Kim. I think I was going to maybe focus more attention on human resources. So I don't really come from an arts background, but when I first moved to Los Angeles, I started attending an event called Wildness, and it was at the Silver Platter in MacArthur Park. Yeah, and that was sort of where I saw that things could be done in art that were really kind of exceptional and made me think about my own identity, in particular as a diasporic Korean who really didn't grow up around a lot of Koreans. So then basically I met some people through that experience, mainly social experience. And in 2010, we just decided that there are a lot of cheap spaces to rent and not a lot of places for our friends to show the work that they're doing. So we literally just thought we'd just rent one of these defunct gallery spaces in Chinatown and start showing work. So anyway, that's really kind of how we got started. There were 5 of us, and we really just scraped together money, usually by selling alcohol illegally, and yeah, just scraping enough money to pay the rent every month, and that was in 2010. And then, you know, it's sort of post-financial crisis, so you know, and we didn't really promise a lot to the artists, but we promised that we would be there, we'd support their installations and the productions they were doing. And we'd try to provide whatever money we could, but we would provide some money, but we kind of assured them it would never be really that much. And so I guess in the 12 years since then, we've really kind of picked up a lot of momentum. I think after 2 years, we got our first like art forum review. That was such a huge deal. And eventually, I guess just to really fast forward, we became a space that was one of the few spaces that's, you know, more or less partially funded by the Warhol Foundation. And I guess that's something that we'll get into later when we talk about sustainability and things. But that's kind of, you know, I guess really, you know, it just came out of a social commonalities that I had and the desire to foreground work that we really thought was just didn't really have any access to exposure or a critical market really, because we've never really been able to provide a financial market.
I'll go next, I guess. Hi, my name is Inyoung Yeo. So I'm an artist and I'm also the co-founder and director of SpaceOne. So we started in 2014, and it was, I think, like a lot of these sort of independent or alternative spaces, we started very organically. But what was kind of special, I guess, was that we started in this kind of abandoned market in Seoul, and so we're at kind of at the top of a mountain or near the Namsan or Seoul Tower in Haebancheon. And yeah, so it was like completely abandoned, and like, we had to like clear it out. And of course, as artists, like we decided to make it into an art space, and that's how it really started. And yeah, well, I think sustainability is like, of course, always an issue, and we'll address that later on. But yeah, in the first, I think we got lucky maybe in 2017 with all the like redevelopment and gentrification that was happening in Seoul. We became a part of we were invited to the Seoul Biennial of Architecture and Urbanism, and that was kind of like one of the main kind of projects that kind of kept us going. And that's the video that's also that I'm showing at TAM. So yeah. I think that's good enough information for now.
Hi, I'm Jungmin Cho, and I'm the founder and director of White Noise in Seoul. And well, White Noise started in 2018 and kind of really outside of Seoul. Like usually there are galleries where alternate live spaces are gathered in kind of hipster places or like famous places these days, but my place is kind of really outside of those places. But yeah, originally that was my personal space with some of my friends, but some flew away for studying abroad or some didn't come that often, so I was the only one who left. And at that point, my work was mainly for writing stuff, so I didn't need that much space. So I gathered some friends who are making interesting stuff, and let's do something special, something fun. And it became like 5 years past. Yeah, time flies. So yeah, and well, for now, I think my main goal, I didn't start with a specific goal, but I say that I'm trying to make sustainable community for now. Because I've seen how much community and friends are so important in your art activities. So yeah, that's what I'm doing right now, I guess.
I can talk about TSA a little bit. So we started TSA in Philadelphia in 2009. And like Inyoung said, ours also kind of accidentally became this larger thing. We started Space in New York when I moved there, and then we had folks in Chicago and LA that wanted to also start spaces. And we're kind of just like, I don't know what this is, but sure, we'll keep the same name and we'll figure it out. And then, I don't know, fast forward 14 years later, despite our best efforts, it's still going. And somehow, but that's, yeah, I think that's all I could say about that. So, I mean, I guess, well, I guess my interest in alternative spaces started as a way to kind of make space for myself and other friends. And I think over the years, it has evolved into realizing that the table that I wanted to space at is like a gigantic dumpster fire anyways. So like, I'd much rather just like make my own table and find the communities that are creating, you know, their own platforms. I think that's much more empowering and interesting. So that's kind of where I'm coming from.
I'm an artist who born and grew up in Korea most of my life, and I moved to US about 5 years ago. And I'm also an educator at Drawing Cabinet, which is an art educational studio that I co-founded with my friend Jenny around 2020, which was a space that was alternative to like quote-unquote 미술학원 in Korean, like a very specific art private school that we were like really coming to study art. And first we started as like how to sustain as an artist, like financially, and folks who were interested in teaching, you know, as a foreigner, as like Korean who's like just moved to New York, like LA, and it's like if as I kind of resonate with what Alex was saying. If the institution, there's no room for us, like how can we make something for ourselves? And also the previous model of this private art educational spaces are very hierarchical and very like traditional art making. So we wanted the like young kids to have more opportunity to be exposed to contemporary art. So like, and also we wanted to have more like multi-dimensional space, which turns into a place that we invite local artists to create workshops and share their talents and their ideas of like skills or ideas of teaching. And that's open to public, and we also hold like community play days, like inviting other publics, even like a lot of range of people, like adults who are interested in art, but not having chance to be involved with. So it's kind of like a multi-dimensional space. So that's something that I've been always like very like appreciative of, like people who are doing something that's out of the like mainstream. And yeah, like
Okay, so maybe let's kind of zoom out a little bit. This will be good for me too, because I just moved from New York pretty recently, so I have no idea what's going on here still. Can you all describe sort of the local alternative scene, like so either here in LA or in Seoul, just sort of like what's going on right now in each of those places, like, and if you want to shout out some of your favorite spaces, this could be a good time to do that. So.
White Noise and SpaceOne.
I think I'm actually also very interested to hear what's happening in LA, because I'm also very new. I don't know anything about what's going on here. But I guess, and my information may be a little bit outdated because so my like experience with art spaces in Seoul is mainly in 2020. I had to do a lot of research, and so I was part of this curatorial team, and we invited 10 art spaces in Seoul and 5 international artists, and we did a show in Seoul and Teddy. And it was actually part of Fuji International Project, and that they were doing these sort of outreach. And it was actually very well supported. So we had a really great curator. And so I was kind of in charge of researching art spaces in Seoul. And I think we had a pre-discussion last night a little bit about this, but I think through the research I kind of realized that it's very diverse, and not only in the structures, but also like their goals, and they're kind of blended into like, I think there's maybe what we call mainstream would be more like the centralized idea, and there's some decentralization. So there are movements that are maybe like going against the mainstream, but there's also movements that also kind of go with it strategically, or even just embrace it on some level. So I selected 10 art spaces that were very different in that framework. And White Noise was one of the spaces that was part of that too, and of course SpaceOne. So yeah, I mean, maybe this is a very like general statement that I'm saying, so I don't know. But yeah, it's definitely very active. It's very, very active. Everyone is interested in art and culture right now. There are so many art spaces. Like even then in 2020, we were looking at, because there was an artist who did a mapping of the art spaces, and just everywhere. It was almost overwhelming to look at all of them. And yeah, and then there's a blending of non-commercial and commercial. But I think we also did an interview, and one of the main sort of issue that we found was that the art ecosystem that wasn't very functioning. It wasn't very functional, in that they weren't very connected. There was a lot of disconnection. And there was a huge lack of collectors, local collectors collecting local artists. So local support was very difficult. That's also shifting, I think. There's a change, very slow, but yeah. So is that, so is anyone else gonna, I think that's the local context for now. Maybe,
About Seoul, I think the most point that I could say as a big change is commercial activities through young artists and young spaces, I guess. And yeah, I think it changed a lot since Freeze last year. And I heard that the art sales became double since last year, more than like before 2, even 3, 4 years ago. And I saw so many young artists are emerging these days, and they're pretty open to sell their art in very early period. And I think it's really a big change for the Korean art scene right now. And also there's lots of spaces are coming, like appearing, and they're like, it's kind of showing a lot of pros and cons at the same time, I think. But yeah, some spaces are showing really good creations, but also in other spaces, they're just focusing on how they're gonna sell the artist's works. But I think it is really hard to say what is good or bad. And yeah, I think we're in the kind of really chaotic but pretty interesting period in Korean art scene. And it is pretty interesting to see this phase as a Korean, as a like curator or director based in Korea right now. Yeah. So yeah, I think that's what's going on in Korea right now. Yeah.
Is a lot of the artistic activity really centered around Seoul and like maybe the area, or there's other
very,
like,
very centralized.
so like if you're an artist and you don't live in or near Seoul, like you're screwed basically? That's not necessarily true.
I did a residency in Jeonju last year, which is, the south side, Jeolla area, province. And it's the poor or area of South Korea, but lesser developed. But they do have a lot of local support for the local artists, but yeah, but still, like, it's very dense. Like, quarter of the population in Korea lives in Seoul, so it's still very, very centralized.
I think even in Seoul, there's like a centralization around the north, like Samcheongdong area, like especially last year when freeze happened, like it's for a short amount of times. There's so many traffic internationally, and even like living outside of that track of Samcheongdong or like the main area, like it's just like keep dismissed because of the like time based. Like short amount of time. So I wonder, like, if even within Seoul, like, is there a difference, like, in the normal time? I mean, like, I think last year was a very special occasion, but like Jungmin, you said, like, it's little white noise is a little bit on around the periphery. Like, how does the audience interact with that location? Like, is that something that became like, I don't know.
I think most of people who are coming to white noise, they have very specific, reason to come here.
Right.
So it can be about because of white noise, or it can be like, I'm just dropping by because I have something to do in here, that area. But without that, I think most people don't come. Like, just there's not much like passing by people. But I think it is interesting because anyway they have specific reason, and they have their purpose is only white noise usually, and that makes that much closer to me, I guess. And I think it became much reasonable reason that I can approach to them personally, like talking each other and like guiding through their exhibition things. And I think it is kind of kind of intimidating moment, because we're really outside of that busy art scene, I guess. So yeah, I think it sometimes works as a merit for me, I guess. Yeah.
What's the LA?
I look at me, I just moved here.
I was racking my brain as you guys were speaking of it, because I was thinking, I feel like I actually don't know the kind of the alt space landscape very well these days. When we started, there were very few. I mean, actually, like Night Gallery was complete alt space.
Really?
Because they were only open from 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. and it was basically a cannabis den. And then, of course, they became hugely commercial. There's a place called Public Fiction. There was a number of number of great spaces that maybe aren't around anymore. I think the ones that came to mind were Naval, and Coaxial, which they do a lot of performance and sort of time-based work, and then Murmurs is one that they do a lot of sort of, I guess, alternative or more experimental modes of art, and that's I could probably think of, but the other ones I can think of I feel like are sort of incubating commercial galleries. They do maybe things that are more avant-garde, but they seem to have some kind of trajectory towards hitting the fairs and things like that. So I'm not really, the kind of really true artist-run spaces. There may be people in the audience that either run them or know way more than I do. I don't know, Jisoo, what do you think?
I think recently the art I don't know how to read it, like 2020, 202, 20,
Yeah, 2220.
2220.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's like a recent space that does a lot of performance and like theatric or like even reading events, I think. that's all also pretty new. So even like within like 5 years when I was here, like there's a lot of like different chains opening up. Mermas was pretty recent space too. Yeah. And like human resources, like one of the big like artist firms.
Right.
Experimental work that they present. Yeah.
So maybe I'm gonna kind of smash some questions together. So like given that context, like what's kind of, how do you say this? Like how are these alternative spaces kind of filling in the gaps of what you perceive as lacking in sort of like the, I don't know, quote unquote mainstream or larger institutions? You know, or maybe another way to put it is like what do you see either your spaces or other alternative spaces as being an alternative to? Like what are you actively trying to not be? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'll answer that first because I'm really curious what the kind of the Seoul, I guess, counter answer would be. I think human resources specifically, and certainly coaxial, naval, maybe drawing cabinet as well. And I don't mean necessarily me specifically in terms of personal mission, but I think us as a body of interested people at human resources, we just see through just what we see in LA or through personal relationships we have that there's the main gap is access to organizations or institutions that'll show your work, mainly because they just don't have an obvious commercial appeal, right? And I do think that tends to be more burdensome on minority groups, Black and brown, LGBTQA. So I feel like we tend to showcase work that maybe comes more from those sort of underexposed communities, I'd say. I mean, they're not necessarily just as a completely general statement, but I guess in that sense, the Feminist Center for Creative Work is a really good space that addresses that issue. And then I think that just maybe in LA specifically, there's sort of a lack of critical discourse around, not absent, but maybe not as much critical discourse that we might like to hear, and maybe there aren't really spaces that are trying to promote that as much. So I guess that's something that maybe Drawing Cabinet tries to do, but because the issue of inequality and the art ecosystem is very prevalent in LA, I'm curious what that might be like in Seoul.
I mean, of course, when I decided to continue running the space, I did continue with the purpose, and I think like everyone else, it was because I saw like a gap or a lack of representations of. I think at the time in 2015, the biggest issue for me was that there was a big gender gap to me. I felt like there weren't enough female directors. It was more like male directors, male old directors with female almost assistants. No offense, but it's it's a very patriarchal society. Just even like I think we all know this. Maybe this is. So that was my biggest issue, but I think it has changed a lot now, and there are so many like female leaders. I mean, maybe not on the political side yet, so it's still very imbalanced. But I think in the arts, there's definitely, and then the younger generation, women are very active and very they're leading a lot of these organizations collectively too. So that's definitely changing. But even with the art, I think Korea or Seoul, it's really young. So I think it takes time, but maybe when we talk about minority or inequality in Korea within the context of South Korea, or I think it's more to do with, because you're also talking about how we're like a one race. There's not much racial stuff, but there's of course the gender and the LGBTQA, and then still I think. And now I think there's some exploration of the older generation artists, especially the female artists, because it's always been mostly the male artists that's been prevalent. So they're now, I think, exploring female artists. They're trying to do more female artist solo shows, like female artists in their 60s, 70s, or 80s age. So there's, I think it's, the context is slightly different. And then, of course, the international thing, I think that's a whole different thing. So what I tried doing was to try and create a platform that has a more balanced, like international and Korean kind of collaboration. That's more collaboration than hierarchical, because it tends to be very like Western centric or Eurocentric or white male centric. So yeah. What do you think?
So about my, I think it's really becoming like many spaces and artists are trying to talk about these issues, but I think the problem is that it ends in like just 1 or 2 or like really small, short time. So I think it is really important to talk it really sustainably, like in a long term, and just issuing this topic regularly. So I think that's the reason why I think the community that can support each other and just make a little trigger to move themselves, because we're the kind of people that don't move by ourselves that much, but if you touch someone, like making a little trigger, they move really actively, I think. So we have kind of that common trait, like I guess. So it is really important to make those little triggers, like becoming those triggers to each other. I think to keep saying those issues, not forgetting those problems. Yeah, so I think that's kind of my tries to be out of mainstream, because mainstream is just consuming those topics, I think. But yeah, I think it is really important to present where it's considering these issues really carefully and important. Yeah, I think that's, very important activities.
That kind of relates to something you said earlier, Eric, where you're saying there's all these spaces here, and then some of them kind of just feel like they're kind of incubating to become like a larger commercial space. Like they're just like some. This is my experience in New York as well. There's so many alternative quote unquote spaces, and they're just like poorly funded commercial spaces, basically. But like if we're all, if we're all doing like essentially the same thing, like putting work in a white cube, like what's structurally different about these spaces that you think makes them alternative? Like, so what sort of like organizational strategies or like governmental strategies or like funding strategies, like what are some ways that you've seen that are, I don't know, like alternatives to just sort of like the typical sort of top-down sort of hierarchy that we see in a lot of these spaces?
I feel like you asked a really huge question there.
Yeah, just go on.
Yeah, so I mean, well, number one, I mean, I'm not really disparaging about, space. I mean, I'm involved in a commercial gallery too, so I don't certainly disparage the desire to become part of the art market. There are a lot of galleries that I really like a lot, so that do cool things. So I don't know if, we can delineate from there first, because, if you have a commercial strategy to funding your kind of curatorial program, then, you do have to, there are certain things that you probably do have to chase, right? So are you wondering about the alternatives to that, or?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I think that a lot of spaces don't question how they are structured, and we just end up mimicking the exact same structures that we started out as being an alternative to. You know what I mean?
Right.
So like and I'm not saying that we have to be anti-commercial. I think that there's room for that, but then is there something different, like sort of behind the scenes, like, okay, we're going to distribute the money this way, or this is how we budget, or this is how we make decisions. Like like for example, like at TSA, like and this is where a lot of tension comes in, because we use like sort of old terms like director and co-director and stuff like that, but we don't operate that way at all. We actually operate very non-hierarchically. Like each of our spaces has complete programmatic control over what they're showing, and nobody else can tell them what to do. And there's like one or two links at each site, and then those people, we all meet together as kind of the quote-unquote steering committee, again, like sort of dead language. But that's like, we meet together to talk about like sort of larger organizational stuff, and we make decisions through, on paper it's by majority, but in practice it's through consensus, So like things like that, that's what I'm kind of thinking about.
Yeah. I don't know, I guess I'm thinking that, a blurb on how we each kind of go about governance and sustainability, I think that's my best way of articulating what I know. I don't really have a lot of theoretical knowledge or organizational theory. So, go.
I don't know, I just wanted to slightly go back and thinking of what our space are doing in terms of drawing cabinet, to a former question that I think Jungmin also mentioned about community, and I think one of the things that I realized the classes are doing is a lot of our students are just moved to Korea, just moved to US, or they born here for second generation or 1.5 generation. But then some of the folks just come to the space to just share Korean culture. They're not really necessarily interested in art or classes, but they feel some sense of belongings, and it's really meaningful to provide that. Even for me, I'm kind of new to think about what's Koreanness, or what's the Korean culture in the United States. I'm also recontextualizing myself as well, but just going through that journey with these young kids is kind of meaningful. So I think at least we can provide that in a small, even though it's a small group. So I just wanted to mention that. And in terms of sustainability, to the business part is my friend, co-founder Jenny, is mostly running it, but how we program. So I don't I can't say the details, but we do a lot of tuition compensation. So for the class fees, mostly our profits are from the class fees, students pay for their classes, or the audiences pay for the workshops. But we also do free public community events as well. But then when we have the class tuitions, you can always it's kind of a university system in a way too. We can always apply for funding or scholarship. So each class we always select one student for free tuitions depending on their situation, and also we're gonna at the end of June, which is one of the exciting things we're looking forward, is there's local art craft flea market that's happening around that neighbor, and we are collaborating with them, and students can go and sell their artwork, and whatever they sell, it comes to half and half of their tuition. So like they can actually create works and make art and like interact with like a local community, but then also that goes back to their tuition. So we're thinking like some small things like that.
Inyoung, not to put you on the spot, but you had mentioned that you like to focus more on kind of collaborative projects, and also you want to kind of bring in more. You want to focus less on sort of like very provincial type of thinking, where it's like only Koreans can show up my space, but like you want to sort of move that out. Like, do you feel like that's different from what a lot of other spaces are doing in Seoul?
So that was something that I think something that I can do. So I did it because that's something that I was able to do. So we had always sort of focused on more international collaborations. So we did a lot of international exchanges and collaborations. So we're part of like this Southeast Asian kind of group of art spaces and residencies. So we did this, we were part of the Rojas, I think Rojas Biennial, I think it's called. They're one of the largest or oldest artist-run biennial, I think, in Asia and in the Philippines. And I think Southeast Asia somehow works better collectively or works more actively very well. So we were invited to be a part of that, and that was really exciting. And we did some exchanges and collaborations with Singapore, Artist Run Space, Vietnam, so various places in Asia and then also in Europe. And so this is our first time that we're doing something with you guys in the US. And yeah, I guess like in terms of like this kind of governance and agency, this is how I was navigating in the Seoul art scene to find our own way of being more, like having more agency, because you know, a lot of art spaces generally, of course, but in Seoul, it's very competitive, and then you're very dependent on the government funding, and they only give, I think, like 10 or 15 spaces funding, and now they keep changing it as well. And I think we got operation funding once during the whole time. So we've reached out to like a social enterprise that also supported us. We reached out to like a female CEO who also supported us once. So it's been various kind of resources that we really reached out to get to be sustainable. And for me, I felt it was important that we find these resources not from the artists, but from outside that area, so the artists can kind of actually do their art. And it was also very important that we have a very, so for me, like, I think we also had this conversation last night a little bit, but for me it wasn't so important to do like exhibitions, but it was more important that the exhibitions extend into discussions and extend into projects and like, so to me it's, you know, running the space is also for me an extension of my art practice, but yeah, I think that was important.
I have a question. So like the government funding, like selecting the spaces, is that separate from how other space, like alternative spaces in Korea run by the grant money from the artists?
Yeah, that's separate, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Does receiving government funding of that type, I mean, is there a catch or anything?
There are like 20 pages of documents that you have to propose in the beginning, and they call it and then of course there's a lot of paperwork. Korea's a lot of paperwork. There's a lot of paperwork. Yeah. So I mean, we had a team. I don't anymore, but we had a team. I had a manager, and it's very hierarchical. You have to have. It's really what's really like for me. What's really annoying and frustrating is that when you apply for anything in Korea, there has to be one. You have to apply for it with one person's name, even if you're a collective. There has to be one like 대표, like the kind of like the rep person. And so, for example, like we put in a proposal together, the two of us. This actually happened to me, and this person, we decided not to work together, or he decided not to work with me, and it's under his name, then I'm kind of screwed. You know, that kind of stuff happens. So then there's like this internal, unnecessary sort of, argument and like ownership that happens, and it's really due to that. And I think that in itself is like really problematic. So there's a lot of infrastructural issues with grant applications.
Is there kind of like a trend that, like, or not a trend, but like, if there's like a central, like, government force that like picks the spaces to fund, then is there like, what's their criteria? Is that kind of that will influence the spaces, definitely, and even artists too, right?
I mean, artists. We all know it's like network and subjective and there's corruption everywhere in the world. But for us at the time, this is like in 2018 when we got the grant from the Seoul Arts and Culture Foundation. And they are below the Arts Council of Korea, and then above them is the cultural, what do you call it, another organization. And so there were problems with the jury issue because they were just choosing the same juries, and they were choosing the same people that they had the same network. So they started doing open calls for juries, and so that's also shifted. So now there is a system where they have like open calls for juries, but of course that's being exploited in a different way. Yeah.
Jungmin, would you be able to talk a little bit about like how you think about your space? Because it's just you, right?
Yeah.
So like how you make decisions and
Yeah.
like how you think about that. Like how you
For me, of course, Inyoung runs it by herself too, but until last year, I was still working at the production company as an assistant writer. So I had kind of full-time work during the weekdays, and then I'm spending my weekends for White Noise. So yeah, I knew that government funding, but this could be an excuse, but I couldn't focus on writing tons of documents for that. But anyway, I thought that I could afford the minimum money to run the space, and I want to be free from those documents and all the process that I should consume my energy and complicated relationship to, there's some relationships you should make for that writing document stuff. And I didn't want to do it, and I want to be free from that, so I just use my income to run the space. But I think that's also a very important reason about spaces and artists should be a little bit open to their commercial activities, because we cannot rely on government funding forever, We should be independent, and before our generation, we talk about, I talk with my friends and curators, we usually, our before generation, 70s, 80s born artists, they're mostly very independent for their activities. They knew how to survive without any fundings, and they could make good arts. And big money doesn't make good arts every time. Even though my space started from really raw and almost abandoned, just underground place, we could make really good shows with good artists. And yeah, I believe that good art and shows are not always relying on the budget, and I just wanted to Well, I think this could be sounds a little bit like too, yeah, like young kids, like kids. But I always focus on how much I can enjoy with my friend, the artist. I think it always extends to the quality of shows. I believe in that, and at least we can earn we can share that joy was through the process, and then I think even though nobody, like not many people come, I think it's done for that. Yeah, so yeah, that's how I rest. I'm just spending my income fully, but I think it is more than investment because I met so many amazing people through it, and I could spend my own like creative time instead of that focusing on document stuff. So yeah, I think that's my own strategy. Yeah.
I think you brought up an interesting point. You're intentionally foregoing trying to go for those grants. I think like especially amongst like volunteer-run organizations like GYOPO or TSA, time is like the biggest resource. Like it's like we can do anything with like almost no money, but it's like really like the resource that you have to manage the most. At least in my experience, is time and other people's time. So you're choosing to have less money because you don't want to spend the time doing that because that's more valuable to you. So I think that's really interesting. So I want to make sure we have time for questions, and I could choose to go cynical. I could always choose to go there, but I'm try to be a little more hopeful in this way. So maybe can each of you like answer the question, like why do you keep doing what you're doing? Like we've all been doing it for many years. Like what is it that drives you to keep doing what you're doing? Like Jungmin, you kind of mentioned about relationships.
Yeah. I think you should answer first.
Why? Because I'm the old one.
Yeah.
I guess I keep doing what I'm doing because, let's see, it's hard. One is like, it sucks like being in the position of like a passive victim. Like the art world, like I said, is just like hot garbage, And so like, why am I putting faith in these institutions to like change? Like if like this structure has continuously failed us and historically failed us and continues to fail us, like why do I think that just putting a couple like black and brown people in leadership is going to change the outcome of that system? You know what I mean? So what keeps me going is that like instead of having that passive role, like I think we can all have the responsibility to like let's like model like the way that things should be. And like we all don't have the answers. We all have individual parts and answers, but like we can like model together like what it means to like be community and to truly be like an alternative. So I think like kind of like theoretically that's what keeps me going, and then like sort of like personally like Jungmin said and many others have mentioned, I think like the relationships that you build through these organizations, like those are actually the important thing. Like who cares about TSA, who cares about GYOPO, it doesn't matter. Like, it could end tomorrow and that's fine, but the relationships that we build, I think that's like the real thing, and like I want to like live my life like going to things where there's like the highest probability of meeting other people that will like enrich my life, and that's not going to be at an opening at like fucking Pace Gathering or something, like there's a much higher probability at like things like this or at like things at our spaces, so that's kind of why I'm like into it. How's that kind of doing?
Yeah, I know. I think I'm actually doing this. I think I keep doing it because at least human resources and Bel Ami. I like artists a lot. I want to kind of feel like I guess I continue to earn my inclusion into that community. I think mainly. Honestly, I like artists a lot.
You might be the only person.
And as far as proposing Yeah, I don't really know. I mean, I think I'm actually a little bit cynical about, the kind of art as a vehicle for social change, I'm still interested in people trying to make that thing work, but I'm not, super positive about that possibility. But I do think that, human resources is a pretty good example of getting, places like the Warhol Foundation who wouldn't really talk to us because we didn't have a paid staff person, we had no director, and I think the pandemic, our relationship with Warhol started before the pandemic, but the pandemic kind of brought in this idea like, oh, these places are important even though they don't have the specific organizational structure that we fund. So let's start giving them money. I mean, we had way more, sort of foundation or charity funding through the pandemic than we've ever had. We had so much money. We essentially just started to give away to the artists because, there's no places to show work really. So we just funneled money out. So yeah, I mean, I feel like I like artists a lot. I'm still excited about what they can do and what I'll get to see if I'm sort of in the zone, on a continuous basis. And I still, oftentimes see really cool and exciting things that, I wouldn't get to see if I wasn't putting the time and effort into it.
I have a very quick funny story related to that. We didn't get the NEA grant last year, and part of the feedback was like, we just don't understand how you can actually do this with the budget you're presenting us.
Yeah.
And I was kind of like, we've been doing this for 13 years. It was like it didn't make sense to them. It's just funny. I related to them.
But was it because it was too high or it was too low?
It's too low. They're like, you're gonna do 40 exhibitions with this amount of money. Like, how's that possible?
Yeah.
You don't have paid staff. Sorry.
I mean, I'm thinking both ways, like how to sustain as an artist, like a big question, and also like the things that I do with drawing cabinet. I think there was a lot of difficulties, to be honest. Like we've been 2 years, like a little bit more than 2 years, and I didn't realize how much it takes to actually run a business and like make something new. And I was like struggling with the time, as Alex was mentioning, and like how do I balance between those two? And so like I've been like trying to like kind of like put my fit in, but then like also there's a little bit of distance. So I'm not like involved in the administration stuff that much as before, but I'm like more into the educational part at the moment in drawing cabinet, and like through two and a little bit over 2 years, the students that I first saw was just like only him and me. Like that was it, like no class, and like no one knew about our space, and like how that kid just grew up so much, like for a sort of amount of time, and like the enthusiasm that they're putting in their art. It's something that I was so forgetting for a long time because you're so fed up with this try to survive as an artist and try to fit in this institutions or like the game of art field, and just it makes me bring back to like what I love about art, and they're like really purely like talking about it, and it's all that in their mind, and we had some like fresh crit and they're like talking like without me even. So like seeing that and being part of that is like a really big. It's really meaningful, I think, to like keep doing and seeing that, and like very grateful to actually being able to expose by it too. Yeah.
You're next oldest. You started like that.
What was the question?
Why do you keep doing what you're doing?
The heart wants what it wants, right? yeah, at the end of the day, it's like, oh, I hate this, but I mean, you're an artist and you're like, you run a space because, yeah, it's no matter what you do and how frustrated you are with everything, you just do it because, yeah, you love doing it. You hate it and you love it. So I think it's always like
That's
a
a problem.
love. Yeah, it's always a problem. It's like, I want to have a simple life.
Yeah.
That
But then
doesn't-
you're actually
yeah.
choosing not to.
And then you get
right?
bored. So
Yeah.
complicate my life. So
Yeah.
that's how it is.
Well, for me, the energy could be a curiosity about what kind of people I will meet next time, what will happen, what kind of exhibition will happen next time, what will these artists will do after like 5 years, after, I think, and since I started White Noise, I started with that curiosity, and I spent 5 years was checking those results, I think, like finding those answers from my questions, and I got some answers, but those answers making another questions, I think. So like, yeah, some artists became kind of like weird, rather than really just after finishing our bachelor degrees, and they became kind of big artists who are doing the shows in the organizations and the institutions. And it's really, I feel like I grew up with them all together, and it feels like something really, undescribable mind, intimacy that you have. And yeah, I think I'm just want to see more upcoming events and issues and stories they're gonna tell and we will share. And yeah, that's the main thing. And most of alternative and small spaces like me, I think they're disappearing so fast. And I don't want to be, like, I'm kind of surviving it with hope that I don't want to be one of them. Like, even though, like, young artists did a show before in my space, and it would be so sad that they have CV in the line, one of CV in my space is one of their CV, but it is not no more existing, and that would be so sad, I guess. And yeah, I just want to share more things as much as I can, so yeah, I think that's kind of the reason for me. Yeah.
Well, I know that there are a lot of people in the audience that have run or are currently running alternative spaces, and to make sure we have time for some questions or comments. Does anybody have any? I don't know how to use this. Do you know how to use that one, Aaron? Just through the blue.
Yeah. What's turning on?
Cool, thanks. Oh, thank you.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Can you check it?
Anybody want to?
Hi, I'm Andrea. Thank you for the panel. I really love the questions and just like the discourse that you all have between each other. And I was just wondering if you had run a space before the one that you're currently running, and what you had learned from that previous experience, and how that translated into what you brought into your new space. Thank you.
That's a great question. Thank you.
Well, to start, I didn't have any experience before, like art-related experience before I'm running the White Noise. But yeah, I started White Noise right after my graduation, for undergraduate graduation. And yeah, my major was actually kind of different. It was about fashion design and interior design, but originally at that point, I was more focusing on writing stuff for musical scripts and other like film scripts things. So yeah, I didn't expect everybody talks. It happens really accidentally, but also it was really really unexpected thing for me because I was always the one who dreamed to be a film director. But yeah, suddenly I opened the white noise and now I'm focusing on creating stuff, and I think I'm identifying myself much more as a creator these days, and I'm trying to study more about that these days. Yeah, so no specific career before this.
But is there a difference when you first, like the first year that you did, and like this is like your 5th birthday of White Noise, and the 5th year that you're running, is there a difference?
I think it's pretty same.
Alright.
Yeah, and I think I want to keep us same as much as
That's cool.
long. Yeah, while I'm doing this.
I have something to add. I mean, the question, yeah, human resources was the first space that I've ever done. So, you know, it was an experiment that, you know, still works, right? But I think throughout the time that I've been doing this and other spaces I've seen and other projects I've seen, I really, I guess one thing that I don't like to see is when the preservation of an organization's own legacy really becomes more important than the work they're trying to do. So I try to keep that in mind with really anything that anything that I'm doing, in particular human resources. Though, we've had a lot of institutional precarity throughout the years, and I always feel like it's a really great sort of psychological position to be in. That like if we had to just close up today, like it would be fine. Either the market didn't want us, or what we did was not really needed in the community any longer, and it's okay. We can just close up and just go away, and it's totally fine.
So TSA was also the first space that I ever started. I was exhibitions coordinator after I got out of grad school, and I lasted 6 months there. So that tells you a little bit about how I felt about that job. But I've kind of had an opportunity to basically see 5 spaces start and grow up over the years, since we have 5 locations. And I think one of the hardest things that I'm still trying to learn is that just make things good enough. It's don't make things perfect, just it's good enough, that's fine. Nobody's gonna care that much, it's fine. You know what I mean? So that's a big lesson that I have to learn. And then also when you run a very non-hierarchical and sort of dispersed organization, I'm always thinking about if I micromanage everything, then that takes away ownership from all the members. So how do we create cultures where there's trust involved and people can say they'll do something and then mess up and be like, oh man, I messed up. And it's okay, that's okay. Just try to not do that next time. Where maybe earlier on I would have been ooh, this guy's not doing the thing. Should I jump in? But now I'm kind of at a point where it's okay, this we have to that's going to build ownership and agency within the group if everybody feels they're a valued and important part of that group, and they have agency and ownership over the organization. Because then if it's well, Al's going to do it anyway, so why should I even do it? That makes it more hierarchical and centralized around one sort of personality. So that's kind of one thing that I'm continuing to grapple with.
I saw many new spaces these days. They're sorted by people who didn't major art or who work outside of our scene. And I think that's the reason why these days alternative spaces scene looks pretty interesting. So yeah, I think that draws many various new, fresh perspectives these days.
Question.
Hi, so I did my research in UCLA about alternative art spaces in LA and beyond, and the only question that I don't think was touched on as much from Like my research was about arts activism, which is something that was very important to me. And I know a little bit about human resources, and I'm learning more about all the other organizations. But I just wanted to ask one of my questions from my research: in what ways has arts activism or activism in general been important to your space?
Should I answer or? I'd say that it's been very important to the mission of human resources, but it's harder for me to answer insofar as whether we have a coherent activism strategy. I feel like, because generally we sort of make sure that we're as connected to the community as we can be, given the composition of our sort of curatorial body. And when we get approached by proposals, just artists wanting to do stuff, then we try to have some way of giving them access to us in the space, and I don't know, whatever selection process that we have. So I do think that we put projects that may be motivated by some either overt or underlying political motivation to the front, on the top of the pile. And then at that point, it's a little bit of, do we not feel like it counts though as something that we want to do, even though the political message we totally agree with. So I'm sorry, that's not really a great answer to your question, but, and I do think that in some cases, there may be particular calling that requires some sense of urgency. In our kind of environment in Chinatown, that would be things like gentrification or over-commercialization of areas, around our community. The most stark one that I can remember is when Walmart was trying to come into the neighborhood, and we had sort of this big kind of, it was basically like a punk rock show that was centered around this desire to not have Walmart locally. And actually it was really interesting. It opened up a lot of interesting dialogue about it. There were a lot of locals that wanted Walmart because they wanted to shop there. So we, I don't know if our political sort of position was correct on it according to the community, but yeah, we do think it's very important, whether consciously or unconsciously, to provide at least some part of our activities for political activism.
Yeah, also very important for us to, we started because it was, we started with that kind of purpose of how do we activate an abandoned space? How do we activate the community? How do we connect or disconnect? So there's a lot of, there were a lot of tricky questions, I think, within the context in Seoul, because it's a very different culture. Art is not as widely accepted. It's still very, it's still for the very rich and the kind of small group of people. And so being in a kind of very poor area, and also because it was an area specifically where the North Korean refugees settled. So there was a lot of various issues, a lot of immigrants, not expats. And so we tried a few different things. We reached out to the girls' high school and connected them with a professor in technology. So we did a few different things, and we did public voting for what movie to play in the public space. And we also did some public space activation with a moving truck, creating temporary communities. So there's been always this constant direct and indirect efforts, but yeah, it's always the most difficult, I think, but also the most important part for us.
So like they're literally gonna come take the chairs in like 2 minutes. Do you have a question?
So most of you are hailing from Korea, correct? So I thought it was interesting that in my background, I am from the deaf community here in the United States, and I come from a theater background. And I had my own nonprofit established in South Korea for animal rescue. So I was going back and forth between the two countries. And I was thinking about for theater in Korea and the deaf community in Korea. That's one of the, it could be considered art spaces. So I'm wondering if any of you think that in South Korea, the old-fashioned people, where there's a divide between the older populations and the younger populations, which I've really experienced. And the Animal Rescue Foundation was in 2007. And I think there's one side that are eating the animals, and there's the other side that are rescuing the animals. And I think Korea still has a very strong divide along age lines. So I'm considering a space for theater in the deaf community, and using visual and body language. And I wonder if the artists from Korea feel that Korea is still, suffering from the gap of the older generations and the newer generations. How do you navigate that?
Thank you. That's a great question.
Yeah, that's a very difficult question because how do we navigate? It's always about how do you navigate. I think it's a long answer, so I don't know if I want to start this answer. But there is context, right? There's context behind this because the older generation, of course, is war and dictatorial kind of. There was a political, very quick shift, and then of course the economic shift. So. In the art, specifically in the art, I think things are changing. So, but the top-down culture is very, very still intense. So, I think, like anywhere else in the world, you just have to kind of speak that language and strategically navigate around it. I mean, that's how I do it, but do you have a better insight, Vicky?
With communicating with old generation. That's a question. In terms of the art scene, I think, thinking about my parents, they're not really art people, and they're really conservative, 60s born parents. But yeah, we had a lot of trouble while I was dreaming at in my teenager. I was dreaming to be in the art scene as a something like artist, various artist dreams. and that always has some problematic situation with my parents. But nowadays, I'm pretty in a good relationship with them, and we have this long time of trying to understanding each other, like cultural gap and perspective. But I think it is all based on time. Yeah. It needs struggle, of course, but yeah, like my parents, I've been doing white noise for 5 years, but they came for only 2 times during 5 years. And they're really, well, but I think that's also their attitude as in understanding me, just letting me go. But, well, sometimes everything looks so violent if I try something to, like, trying to understand someone. But I know that if I really need to try to manage this generation gaps, but yeah, I think I'm still figuring out.
Can I chime in a little bit?
Yeah.
I think, like, first of all, there's a lot of change right now, like, or at least there's a start of change. I found like there's a big Me Too and like all the old cultural, like mainstream power, like males were taken down of this whole phenomenon like a few years ago, and after that, like there's a lot of, like I don't know how realistic that's happening, and so like within the art scene, I see, like even like for here community, like the artists are really like coming more forefront of their identities, and the feminism issues is more heated up. So that's something that's like those issues are like not being discussed between generations. Like, but I think like it's exposing a lot more to be able to like even talk about it. And secondly, I think the younger generations doesn't care anymore to be accepted by the system or their power. Like they're more free, like as Jungmin mentioned, like you don't want to do those government things anymore, right? Like you just want to be free from that. So I feel that there's like a very like, oh, I don't care, you know, like kind of good way, like a free way, and that combines with this international attention of Korean culture, including K-pop and like art scene commercially, like mostly, but there's a lot of like international attentions that's putting up on this Korean art scene and art culture, and I think young generations are like really absorbing that a lot, and it's kind of their own way of forming power, I feel like even. So like, yeah, that's how I see.
So I know there's more questions, but we're way over time. So I want to thank all of my panelists for this discussion. And we can continue the conversation downstairs, where we'll have some drinks and snacks. It'll be more fun to talk over drinks and snacks, and we can go see Jungmin Cho down there. So I'd like to invite everyone, just one flight down, 5th floor, there'll be signs so you'll know where to go. So I'll see you all down there. Thank you.